Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to my podcast. I'm Dan Hendrickson, and this is my podcast on danhendrickson.com. We're really privileged today to be meeting with somebody and chatting with somebody that I've known for a long time. He is my first martial arts instructor. And I've gotten a lot of comments from you people over the years on some of the nice fight scenes that I've written in some of my books, how I've developed strategy and scenes that you all say you can visualize. Well, a lot of the credit for my writing in the fight scene categories has to go to this guy. He's the one that taught me about strategy and fighting. He not only taught me how to do the moves, he taught me how to put them together and make them work to the point that they were actually effective. And his name is Bill Shaw. And Bill Shaw has been in the martial arts most of his life. And he's been a fantastic practitioner of that for a long time, and he's made a name for himself. Some of his credentials are he's a 5-time world champion black belt fighter. He has the Lifetime Achievement Award, Masters Hall of Fame, Master Instructor of the Year, IIMAA Hall of Fame, 3-time Kung Fu Hall of Fame nominee inside Kung Fu Magazine. He's the originator of the Han Fu method of fighting and self-defense. He's also been a Hollywood stuntman, stunt fighter, fight choreographer, and actor. He's quite a guy. I've known him for a long time, and I'm very privileged to have him here with you. And Bill, why don't you say hi to the folks?
Hello, how's everybody doing? Can't answer me, but how you doing?
That's great. Well, Bill, I know that your passion has always been to teach. And what is the main reason you became a martial arts instructor?
Oh, gosh. Just passion, I guess. I mean, I got to the point that, as far as choosing a career in my early 20s, just wasn't anything that really appealed to me. I mean, I'd done sales, I'd done, drove concrete truck, repaired appliances, refrigeration, different stuff like that. But it just kind of it was the only thing that didn't feel like work. I just really enjoyed working out with the guys and watching them. I love the look in somebody's eyes when they finally catch what I'm trying to say, especially guys that have trained in other styles. And they kind of look at you like, and then finally you show them something and it clicks and they go, I love that look.
Been there.
Yeah.
Been there. I was one of those guys. So what keeps you doing it?
Well, I don't do it as much as I did. I don't have a school. I was about to start another one, actually just before the pandemic, just 3 months before. A guy was letting me use his Taekwondo school to work out in, and then he decided to move, and it was up for grabs. And I thought, well, let me wait till after the holidays. Bang. So I dodged that bullet. I work out all the time with different groups of guys, and I can't help but open my mouth and make suggestions.
Yeah.
And there's some really good guys. The championships came later in the senior division, and I have to credit the quality of people that I found to work out with. Anybody that's a champion knows that. The guys that you're training with aren't of any caliber, it's really going to be tough to go up against the world's top.
Yeah.
So, it's the same thing in training in school. If the guys you're training with are trying to help you get good and you're trying to help them get good, then you're both going to get better. But if somebody's there just for their own thing, they want to be better and they don't tell the guy, oh, your balance is off here, you should have done this, then, it's a little bit of a selfish approach and you just don't get there.
Makes sense. You've been involved in film and television since about the late 1980s as a stuntman, actor, and fight choreographer. What got you interested in that end of the martial arts world?
Oh, I can tell you that exactly. After Bruce did his big, people that are old enough to remember that in the 70s, and his big burst onto the scene, everybody was trying to put martial arts in movies and TV, and it basically sucked. It looked like exactly what it was. No offense to my stunt pals, but you get a bunch of stunt guys together and they go, oh, we can make it look like that, but it didn't.
Right. Yeah.
So I think ultimately that was it. Plus, what's my next thing? I had a school, pretty successful, and I was writing articles, and Back then I was rated in the early 80s, rated in the Northwest #2, I think it was, that region. So that was kind of, what's the next step? And that's actually why I took that acting class.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, so I can do the choreography. I knew I could do that. I knew I could do this fight scenes. And I thought, what if I luck out and I get on a set somewhere and it's my turn to do the fight. And all of a sudden the director turns to me and says, okay, when you come in the room, I want you to say,
Mm-hmm.
I thought I should be prepared for that, right? Just like martial arts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So that got me into the acting class, and that was kind of fun. I really enjoyed that. And, that's a whole long story how I got into that. In fact, I wrote a little pamphlet for some of the Comic Cons I go to once in a while when I get invited, and people ask that, and I go, here's this handy dandy thing you can buy for.
There you go.
So, but there's some stories you might remember. You remember the first day one of acting class, or day two, I guess it was, when we were supposed to do an audition scene?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll save that story for some other time.
Yeah. I know you've done a lot of training with law enforcement, military people as well. Can you explain the difference between what it takes to train someone to win a real fight and choreograph a fight scene in a movie?
Oh, yeah, it's pretty easy, actually. A fight scene in a movie has to look real to people that aren't necessarily trained, and it also has to look good to somebody that is trained, because there's more of those all the time. If you do a speed move from dead still, the non-trained person is going to have trouble following what you did. So in choreography, you need to telegraph a little bit. And telegraph is, of course, pulling your hand back before you punch, or some little shift that, for fighting, you go, oh, you just told me what you're going to do.
It's one of the things you always told us not to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, so you need to have that so the audience can realize what's going on, especially if you don't have a director or cinematographer that's working with you to maybe shoot an inset of something to kind of stretch that time out from what it really was.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of tricks that can be done, but not ever. The problem is, unless it's a full-blown martial arts movie, it's just a fight to them. They don't care.
Yeah.
So real fight, you want to do things that they either don't expect, or you intentionally telegraph that in a way that's a lie.
Okay.
So, that when somebody shifts their hip a little bit to kick high, that little shift. So if you can do that and launch a speed straight punch, then you've just lied to them with a fake telegraph. It's kind of like a fake, but it's a little different than what most people think of.
Yeah, I remember one of the techniques you taught us really early was get them to block the punch that doesn't come so you can hit them in the other area.
Yeah.
Like you're going for a high back fist and they're blocking high, and then you can go with a low side kick or a low punch to the guy. I remember that stuff. That was
right. And that has to do with the count timing, depending on the person, your opponent. If you do a 1-2, most anybody can catch up with that. So you have to break up the timing into 1 1/4, 1 1/2. Sometimes with the same hand,
wow.
It's almost a 0 count. So if I start a launch to your face and then drop it down immediately, it's going to land on your rib the same time that would have landed on your face. So that's a 0 count fake.
0 count fake. Well, I started training in your studio in Casper, Wyoming in 1982. And I went from you straight from boxing. And I was intrigued that you referred to the Hanfu Was freestyle, form of martial arts, that you refer to it as a freestyle. Can you explain what it means and how's that aided you in your teaching and your martial arts experience?
Well, it's a double-edged sword, goes both ways. Freestyle means that it's not a traditional classical Goju, Shotokan, Taekwondo, Kempo, one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just becoming popular at that time. In fact, couple years before that, before I met you, I got a lot of grief for mixing stuff. How dare you, Maverick, think that you mix this stuff, you know? But then a few other people that were doing that were winning tournaments against people that weren't doing that. So there was a movement called the eclectic movement. I don't know if you remember that, but it was borrowing from different places. And what people would do is they would take, okay, I like this throw, and you know, I like that hard Shotokan block, and I like the Jeet Kune Do straight blast punch, but they weren't coming up with footwork or hand positions or blocking methodology that put it together. So it was segregated. So they had to, what I was working on was things that would flow. So in other words, from this stance, I can alter it this way or that way. And from either one of those three, I can still do a throw. I can still do my punch. I can still do my kick. And sometimes, depending exactly what you want to do, where his placement is, how far away he is, how high you want to kick, you know, alter it a little bit. But you do it in ways, hopefully, they're not telegraphing. So, what was the question again?
Well, that answered it. Yeah. Now, if you remember your ranking system in Casper, it was white belt, blue belt, gold belt were the first three belts.
Yeah.
And right after I got my blue belt, I was working out in the studio with a couple of the other guys, and I'd come to you from boxing, and you were out there and you were talking about techniques and stuff. And I flat out told you that I did not believe in the 1-inch punch. I said, there's no way you can get that much power in a 1-inch punch. And you kind of smiled, kind of the same little smile you got right now. And you said, Dan, go get some focus pads. So I go over to the corner of the coon and I get some focus pads, and you had me stand, I think about 10 feet away from the wall. And you got into your stance, and it was just a basic straight punch. You measured it out with your knuckles, and you pulled your hand back, and bam! And I swear you lifted me right off the ground and pushed me into the wall. And I was so stunned, I could hardly breathe. I got down, and you walked up to me and very calmly said, everything that you need to know about that punch, I have already taught you. Care to elaborate a little bit on that? Because I was just a blue belt. I was just a blue belt.
Okay, well, not having an instant replay of that particular moment. What I'm talking about is, okay, so you were the first full belt, color belt. So I focus a lot on your balance, on your structural skeletal alignment. So in other words, where your elbow is in relation to your shoulder and your fist, and where you're hitting, and path of trajectory and all this kind of stuff. I don't necessarily use all those terms at that level, but you're learning that. Relax. When you punch, you relax and you lock it all the way out through the target. You don't imagine you're hitting anything, you just hit. That kind of thing. You know,
Yeah.
If somebody comes and wants to learn the 1-inch punch, it's really hard to teach it to them because they have all these preconceived ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if they've trained before, you have to break all these bad habits. So it's really easier to take somebody like yourself and go up, and then all of a sudden at brown belt, you go, okay, here, punch from here. And they look at me usually like, okay, you haven't taught me that yet. And I said, what? Just do your punch. You know, I 4 or 5 inches then. Just do your punch from there, just like you would if you were doing a pak sao, and forget that you're hitting something. And 90% of the time, they get 50% of the power the first time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, even back in the 80s, when I was a student, you had a passion for videotaping your martial arts scenarios. I remember even part of the introduction to when we came into your studio and we were talking to you about becoming a student. You would put us in a room and we'd watch a video presentation that you put together with some of your students, and it almost looked like a movie. It was really cool. I really liked it.
The alley fight almost was a movie. Yeah.
But it was cool. Anyway, was that one of the things that really started getting you interested in film and stuff when you were doing that?
No, I was interested before that. That's why I did it. You know, because I thought I really think I can do this, but I hadn't done it.
Uh-huh.
So what I did is, students, I don't think anybody then had been there with me more than 6 months. And so I thought up this little scenario, and we had done a couple of TV commercials. And so I called the guy that did that and told what I wanted to do. He agreed to moonlight it. And so at 1 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock, whatever it was at night, I think it was from 9 to 1 or 2 in the morning, went down to the store that somebody gave us permission to use. And outside in the alley, we did this fight. And then the guys chased me through the store and all that. And so helped me edit it up. And I saw that I could do this.
Huh.
So it's on YouTube somewhere.
Yeah. I watched it recently because I was just going back down memory lane.
It's dated with everything we're wearing.
Yeah.
And the music.
I just remember that the moves were really tight and cool to look at, and it was a little different than some of the other stuff you saw even back then on TV. It was nice.
Yeah, why
cool.
do it if you're not going to do it good, huh?
Yeah, really. Hey, I remember my degree is in journalism. That's what I was studying when I was at the college there. And my newspaper did a series of articles on you, of which I got to do one. And we invited our newspaper photographer to come down, and they wanted to take some shots of you. And so I was the only one there, and I think I was only maybe a gold belt by then. But I volunteered to be your judo dummy.
Yeah.
And I mean, you threw me around that dojo from one end to the other. Okay. And I mean, it took everything you taught me to just to stay afloat. I mean, I had to know my falls like I never knew before, because you were going full bore. And I thought, man, this is just for show. This is just for pictures. So like, is that the kind of intensity that you had to work with your guys that you did the stunts on in the movies? Did you guys really go that hard, or?
Yeah, I was holding back.
You were holding back. Okay.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, my idea is if I throw you, and that mat wasn't soft and cushy. It wasn't like a gymnastic floor. It was, you weren't going to chip an elbow, but get the wind knocked out of you pretty good.
Heck yeah.
My idea is you're not getting back up,
at
least for a moment or two.
So that makes it look real.
Right. I mean, if somebody falls from 3.5 feet and they go down, they land on their back. I mean, you see it on video street fights, and people land in the street that way, but that's just them. If you take that and I'm throwing my weight on top of it, accelerating you all the way through the surface, that's a whole different impact story. So that's kind of the idea of the throws. I had I don't know if you read it on any of the websites. My websites are so bad right now. Get them all revamped. They're just old and I haven't paid any attention. But one of them, a guy writes to me that he was over in Afghanistan, I think it was. And there's a whole story about how he's clearing a room and the guy stepped around the corner and had a rifle on him.
Wow.
And had cleared that and threw him Osotogari, the rear throw. And he said, and most people do that throw wrong, by the way. But he said, I could hear your voice from the video saying, take him all the way through the floor. And so I did. And he didn't get up. So, because if you don't, now you're in a wrestling match. He's got a gun, sidearm, knife, who knows what, so when you decide to go down, you don't go down just to go down's sake. That's one of my complaints about most of the Brazilian teachings. I like a lot of their stuff, but that's the one thing is they aren't utilizing the takedown as a takeout move, which it potentially can be. So, and I'm not saying none of them do, just the focus doesn't seem to be there.
Yeah. Well, I had a brief stint with law enforcement, and I remember that one of the things you taught us when I was taking classes with you was in a judo move. A lot of times it's good to initiate it with a strike. And that gets the other person off balance so they can't resist, because anybody that's ever done any judo knows that when you just try to suck up on a throw, if they're resisting, it's tough. But you
White
taught us
belts that train for a month can keep a brown belt from throwing them.
but you showed us those strikes, and
Yeah.
and they, believe me, in real life it works. I've seen it work. I had to take a guy down and disarm him because of it, and it was that technique. It was just a simple strike. I hardly really didn't hit him. I just slapped him in the face.
Yep.
But then I was able to do a nice agoshi throw, and he was down on the ground, and I disarmed him. So
Perfect.
it's really cool to remember that. So I had a similar experience. So the difference between choreographing a fight scene for a movie and training someone to fight for real. Do you think that the martial arts schools today make that difference? And what I'm thinking about is, a lot of movies out there, a lot of kids get, and a lot of people get, trained to look at what they think is real fighting in the movies as opposed to what's real fighting in real life. Do you think the movies get in the way with the way martial arts trainers teach people today?
Well, there certainly was a time I think I could have said that. Now the stuff is so flamboyant with all the jumping, barrel roll, spinning, and climbing up and hooking a leg around a neck and throwing, all this stuff that today's audience thinks cool, I guess. And you've got the MMA fight. So, people get to see what really takes somebody out and what doesn't. So I don't think that's as big a thing. There is there's been a watering down in martial arts with the market turning to teaching kids.
Mhm.
You remember our school, we had 200 adults and 15 kids.
Right.
And it's not that we wouldn't teach kids, but that wasn't our focus. And the kids that we taught were good. That one little guy, what was his name? Aaron. One of those demos he did with me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so we were trying to teach. It's just that most kids are not that serious, and I wasn't going to charge the parents for karate lessons and give them babysitting, So, but there's a thing now, especially with MMA around that, the old karate tournament style of point fighting, semi-contact, heavy contact sometimes, isn't the real thing. And somebody put, who was, I think it was Dan Hendrickson, top fighter, world champion, been around forever. Actually, in the early days of my tournaments, I copied a lot of the stuff he was doing because, all my stuff was real based, not tournament based.
Right.
And we've become really good friends and have been for the last 30, 40 years. But he posted something. Do you guys feel bad when they say that, your karate techniques, your traditional techniques won't work for real? And I said something about, does that include all the people that we knocked out by accident? Because it happens. You get disqualified and you knock people out, you break ribs. And, I got a ton of stories along that line, but it doesn't take anything away from it. When I first came back to training, I got taking care of my mom as she was elderly and her business and all those affairs.
Mhm.
I ended up getting out of it for like 12 years or so. Didn't stop thinking about it, but wasn't regularly training or working out. And then when I did start training, got back in shape and started working out, the only guy I really knew that had a school was an MMA school, and I didn't even know him that well, but one of his friends was a good friend of mine that I trained with a lot. So I figured I wasn't going to get my bell rung if I went there to do some stand-up. It was amazing to me what worked and what they fell for. And and then I'd do some there's sparring, not full out, but the groundwork and the whole thing. And my old jujitsu came into play, and it was more than enough most of the time. But there's not, until you get to the ground and pound or the exchanging punches, inside boxing range. And of course, we stopped that with either Wing Chun or Jiu-Jitsu. So you don't just keep hammering each other. And that doesn't really happen much in MMA because of those same reasons. It only happens in boxing because you can't do anything else except punch. So I kind of having a senior moment here. Did I answer the question? And
yeah, you did.
okay.
So the last question I have is kind of a fun one. We can make it fun. I would just like to know, in your experience in film, what is the funnest thing that you ever got to do in front of the camera that you can think of right now?
Well, one of them I won't tell you, but second place might be landing hits on Billy Zabka. Karate Kid and Cobra Kai. Yeah, he's a really good guy too. He's one of my favorite. I have like 5 or 6 really favorite Hollywood people, and he's definitely in that group. Probably the number one was the very first thing that I did in front of the camera, and that was chasing Drew Barrymore around an apartment with a knife.
Oh boy,
that was just surreal. Well, here's what happened: is they introduced. Okay, here they didn't introduce us. Okay, you're gonna take this knife, and you're gonna do this, and she's gonna go here, and then you're gonna dive over the couch, and she's barely gonna miss her, and she's gonna run out. So we did the whole thing, the master shot of it. Did the whole thing, run around the corner, down the hall, and then you wait till they say cut because they're getting their finish roll out. And so right after they go cut, she turns to me and says, "Hi, I'm Drew." Okay, first time in front of camera with Drew Barrymore, and she's introducing herself to me. It was just real surreal.
That's pretty cool.
Overnight success. Only took 7 years from the first effort to get on film to that.
So, I'm sure that took a lot of effort just to get in the door there. I mean,
well, it wasn't alone. It was Mike Stone got me in, and we had become friends. I'd gone out there and met with Sam Furstenberg. I sent him that video of that fight, and he wrote me a letter back and said, "Yeah, next time you're in LA, stop and see me." Well, guess where I was next week. So he met with me. He was working at Canon Films then, and really liked my stuff, but he didn't have any martial arts projects coming along. He did the ninja movies.
Okay.
The first American Ninja, I think it was and that Mike wrote. But he gave me Mike's name, and so I called Mike, and we had dinner and hit it off really good, and stayed in touch. And he actually was doing a movie in South Africa, another ninja movie, and he said, "I'd like to take, if they'll let me take one more person, I'd like for you to come out and work with me." And I said, "Oh, great," but they wouldn't let him take anybody else. And when he got back, he goes, "Okay, I'm done with movies. I'm moving back to the Philippines and retiring." And so then he invited me out there, and I said, "Sure." So I went out there and spent 2 weeks with him. And I think that impressed him that I came out there, and we just stayed in touch without movie being part of it. Not even martial arts really being that much of it at that point. And so when I had an opportunity, it's, I wasn't a friend because I'd just become a friend. And so he gave me a call, and that's how I got started.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, folks, I mean, just got a little glimpse into a man who's devoted his life to something that has made an impact. And
well, let me correct you on that.
Okay.
I've done it all my life, but I haven't devoted my life to it. I've got friends and family and God. And, I would tell people in my office last time, says, "Well, if you're going to get good, you really have to commit to this. You really have to do just this. You have to live it, right?" And I go, "No, if you live karate, that's going to be a pretty sad life."
Yeah, you're right.
Compared to what else out there. And I wasn't correcting you as much as letting people know that if you're serious about it and you want to train and you want to learn, get involved with a good school. Those are hard to find now, but one of the ways you can find those is, do they have more adults than they have kids? And if they do, you're probably at a good school. Doesn't mean the others aren't, anything like that. But I remember people would come in and I'd say, "Well, you remember I had a questionnaire. Why do you want to take karate?" And so often people would say, "Well, to get in shape." And I go, "Well, factoring in for inflation," I'd say, "Well, $20, you can buy a good pair of Nikes.
Yeah.
Hit the track for free if just getting in shape is all you want. And that comes from an insecurity of coming into a school and, well, I want to be able to defend myself. And some people, like you, already had boxing. You want to defend yourself more. Other people come in and they have nothing. There's nothing in the tank.
Mhm.
And so they usually use that term. I try to use a little humor to move them forward, I guess.
Yeah, you obviously did in a lot of different areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right about that other stuff. It's you know, it's not your whole life, but you've definitely done something with it. And I'm really proud to be your friend and to know you. And I'm really thank you for this interview.
Well, likewise,
You
Dan.
know, and it's great. It's great to reconnect. I mean, like I said, Bill and I have known each other since 1982. He was my first martial arts instructor, and I owe him a deep gratitude for the things that he taught me, because I'm able to put them in my books, and I've been successful in those scenarios of those stories because of some of the strategies that he taught me. So this is Dan Hendrickson, and this is danhendrickson.com, and I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and please tune in for the next one. All right. Thank you very much.
You bet. See you guys sometime.
All right.